All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for Let's Go Outside, historical picnicking. So, to get us started, I'm just going to go over a little bit of Zoom information just to make sure everybody is ready to participate, ask questions. All right, so on this first screen, you'll see that we have you all muted for this session. Please don't unmute yourself, but if you have a question, please raise your hand and then I'll call on you. My name is Claire Crane and I'm a volunteer with the castle. And I'll unmute you at that time. You can also put questions in the chat or raise your hand virtually using number 5, the reactions button. Please ask questions throughout. You can have your video on. We encourage it because we love to see smiling faces while we're giving this presentation. But if you prefer to ask questions through the chat, that's okay too. Again, please ask questions, comments throughout this evening's talk. Let's see. So number 2 on the screen is that adding your video or taking it away. Number 4 is the chat. And then 5 is the reactions. So that's where you can find that raise hand button and other things like a thumbs up or a little celebration or heart if you think we're doing a great job. So if you need to leave the meeting for any reason, that's number 6. But hopefully you can stick around the whole time. So let's see, on our next slide, if your name on the bottom of your screen on the lower left isn't yours, you can right click on that name to rename yourself so that we know who to call on. This is what the chat looks like as well. If you have technical questions or concerns, you can use the chat to reach me. And also you can, again, use that if you'd rather not go on video to ask a question, you can ask it in the chat. Make sure that you type it and then hit enter in order to send it out to everybody. You can also change who you're sending it to just the castle if you just have a tech question for me. All right. And then lastly, I am going to pin or spotlight my video so that you don't have to worry about gallery view or speaker view or anything like that. So my video should be spotlighted now. And let's see. So your screen should look something like this. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, again, throughout, please let us know. Raise your hand in your video and I'll call on you, or ask questions in the chat. We're taking them throughout. I'm going to swap my screen share and also my video so that you can see our lovely presenters tonight, Dagmar from the cook shop and Kyle from the castle. So let me change my screen to our first slide of the evening about picnicking, and I will change my video and audio so that you can see and hear our hosts.
Okay, well, hopefully everyone can see and hear us. If not, you can use that chat function and send Claire a message. So thank you, Claire, for that intro. We are going to get started here with just a little bit of history, but we're going to throw things over to Dagmar pretty quickly to get us through our menu. So picnics were popular in the late 1800s among the social elite and slowly gained traction into the wide popularity in the 1950s and 1960s. Tonight's presentation, we're going to explore a little bit of that history a little bit more in depth, as well as show you some of the elements that we've kind of come up with for a historical picnic. So we'll be taking you through that. Tonight's menu items are largely inspired by just 2 cookbooks. One cookbook is, for those of you who have attended the Castle's Food History programs before, is this cookbook here, which is our Centennial Cookery Book, which was created in 1888 at the 100th anniversary of the town. So we use that cookbook a lot when we're doing our food history menus, as well as the Buckeye Cookery Book, which we are going to talk to you a little bit about later on, and that was created in 1877, so it just preceded the Centennial Cookery Book by about a decade. And so Claire is also going to be putting in the chat for you links to those. Those are available online, so if you want to open those, you'll have access to those as well. You can see all the different items that were contained in there. So first, before we get into too much of the history, I'm going to throw things over to Dagmar, who's going to take us through the chicken salad and the slaw.
Well, hello, everybody. As Kyle said, the menu is picnic. So we're going to start with chicken salad first. The main ingredient is the chicken, but the main ingredient in 1888 would have been Jerky's famous sauce. So you have a recipe for that. Kyle and I just tried it for the first time. It is, it's not for the bashful. There's a lot of vinegar in it. Probably for pickling reasons, possibly if the chicken had been around for a day or two, it's going to cut any gamey flavor on it as well. But it is a lot more vinegar based than what we're used to. So because of that, the recipe does call for, I think, a third of a cup or a quarter of a cup of vinegar, and we have opted not to put that in addition to the jerky. So it's just chicken, chopped celery, eggs. You will find that eggs are going into every single recipe tonight, and we don't really know the reason why. We are assuming that eggs were plentiful. It was a good form of protein. I've never heard of it being used in coleslaw. Have you?
I think it is kind of that protein issue, providing a little bit more sustenance. It's also, these are recipes that you're showing off to people with. So the fact that you have more ingredients involved than your run-of-the-mill chicken salad or your run-of-the-mill slaw, it's all kind of showing a little bit. You're being a little bit extra with these recipes.
We have a question already. Sure. Yeah. Can you substitute rotisserie chicken?
Sure. Absolutely. Using a whole chicken, I would recommend as opposed to breast, just because the dark meat is that much more juicy. Your chicken salad with just chicken breast could be on the dry side. So this is the homemade turkey. It would have come in a squeeze bottle.
Wow.
Well, not back then.
No.
How would they have gotten in a jar?
Yeah.
So it's pretty gelatinous, and a little bit goes a long way. I think it calls for 1 to 2 cups, and I am going to say that that is probably enough. So I'm using my hands because one of the other things it called for was softened butter, and there really would have been no other way to get that butter in there. And why they would have added the butter, that I don't know.
And just as you're doing that, so Durkee's salad dressing, we looked that up. You can still buy it today. It was a famous dress. They called it Durkee's famous dressing and meat sauce. It was created by Eugene R. Take a guess. Eugene R. Durkee, founder of E.R. Durkee and Company, spice dealers in Buffalo, New York, in 1857. So this has been going on for a long time. It can still be purchased depending on where you live. And it seemingly has devoted fans in the East Coast, somewhat in the Midwest. St. Louis is supposedly a place where it's a bastion of Durkee sauce. They really love it there. But you can purchase it online through such online vendors as Amazon. You can still get it cheaply on there if you want to try Durkee's original famous sauce.
So this chicken salad would have been put into some type of an earthen pot and then covered with oiled cloth or just canvas or beeswax coated fat muslin. And that was just really to keep any critters out of it. So there's our chicken salad. And then I'll wash my hands and I'll start on the coleslaw.
All right, now as she gets ready to do the coleslaw, I'll go ahead and take us through a little bit more history here. So Miss Claire, if you can bring up our slides for us. All right, so really, next slide. Yeah, great, thank you. So interestingly, kind of what brought on the idea of doing picnics is we saw a resurgence of picnicking as due to the pandemic, with it being offered as one of the few safe practices to undertake. Show of hands, how many of you took a picnic during the pandemic? Few of you? Okay, good. Keep that in mind because we're going to be picking on those that did take a picnic a little bit later. Okay, I'm going to rely on your recent knowledge of picnicking here. All right, so our next slide. All right, so interestingly, some restaurants pivoted to cater to picnics. For example, celebrity chef Curtis Stone opened a temporary pop-up picnic themed takeout restaurant called Picnic Society. You'll hear that term come up a little bit later. Their patrons could order a curated picnic basket like you see on the screen, or create their own menu. The Picnic Society even offered a location to have your picnic on one of their terrace lawns, and they sold everything you need for a picnic, including blankets and lawn games. So it's a one-stop shop for picnics. And the highest price basket was $120. So if we go to our next slide, you can see our menu there from the Picnic Society. Picnic Society was just a temporary pop-up, so it's no longer running right now. So it's kind of taking some deep dive on the internet to find this stuff for you. So some interesting options there, from bag lunch to the Aussie. Curtis Stone is an Australian chef. And then you can, as you see, when you start the soups and salads, you can see that they were kind of pick and mix sort of menus that could have been put into a basket. All right, so let's go to our next slide. All right, so if you're thinking about paying $120 for a picnic basket was really shelling out a lot of money, it's not too far from the truth when you think of the origin of picnics. So now if you're thinking that picnics were mostly done by the wealthy elite. Although the term picnic didn't come into practice until the early 19th century, socially eating meals outdoors harkens back to the 16th century, but was only practiced by the social elite, and nearly always coupled with some sort of outdoor sporting event, mainly hunts. All the way up to the early 1900s, picnics have been for the aristocracy, and they would have relied on the efforts of servants to prepare the meal, as well as transport, setup, and cleanup. A lot of work, as we'll learn about in just a few minutes. So if we look on our screen, we can see Queen Elizabeth having one of the outings, which we can't quite call that a picnic because the term wasn't quite being used yet, but it is an outdoor feast, picnic style, though, as we would term it. And then on the right is another image of a picnic, an outdoor eating being held during a hunt. So the origin of the word picnic is believed to derive from the 16th century, the French term, and it was pique-nique, almost two words, which actually referred to a sort of high society potluck, which was held indoors with entertainment. As the French aristocracy began to flee because of the French Revolution, they went to England. They brought this custom with them, and one London-based group called themselves the Picnic Society, two words, P-I-C-N-I-C, and it was started around 1801, where in addition to bringing a covered dish, and it was still indoors, guests were expected to bring not one, not two, but 6 bottles of wine. right?
It was an all-day
It's
affair.
an all-day affair, yeah. It's a marathon. So, all right, so if we go to our next slide before we go back to Dagmar. All right, so this is kind of what we think about when we think of old-time picnics, the Victorian era, the Edwardian era. Middle and lower classes started to replicate these fancy indoor picnics, and that's where the term stuck, was with what is being done in the Victorian and Edwardian era. You're seeing these outdoor picnics going on. You're still using, this is still being done by the upper social classes, so it's still not really being something that's done by a lot of middle class or working class families. All right, so we're gonna learn about a little bit more history, but we're gonna take a break to go over to Dagmar with the salon.
Okay, so while Kyle was talking, you saw I put together the little bit of dressing that goes in this. It's horseradish, mustard, and vinegar. Yeah. Use the hands again. So this has eggs in it as well. Not a whole lot, just one. You can tell it's a relatively dry, but keep in mind that vinegar makes things break down. So if you made this and tossed it in the morning, by the time you went to eat it late in the afternoon, this will probably be down at least by a third, if not by half. That vinegar is really going to tenderize the cabbage. It smells of horseradish. It smells zippy. Actually looks pretty good. So,
question.
yeah.
Anne and Riley asked, you put in raw egg, correct?
No, this is a hard-boiled egg. Yep, this is a hard-boiled egg. All these recipes are hard-boiled. Their eggs, even back in the day, fresh eggs, they didn't refrigerate. You don't need to. You don't need to today. The theory on that I have been told, not being a hen owner myself, is that if you do not wash the egg is then preserved in its own natural casing, and you wash it before you crack it, because you don't want to get any of the contaminants in your egg. So, you know, salmonella's been around for a long time. They might not have known what it was called, but they would get really sick from eggs that would be out all day long. So their eggs would have been hard-boiled, or in the case of the potatoes, which I'll be doing next, those eggs will be cooked. So they're added raw, but the process will cook them. Okay.
So if we'll go back to a little bit more history here as Dagmar gets the potato mix ready. All right, next slide, please. All right, so as outdoor picnics began to sort of gain popularity among the upper, they're still popular in the upper and middle classes, the planning and orchestration of these events began to be codified in cookbooks like the 1861 Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management. Now, for those of you that took a picnic recently, what was a few things that you packed? So if you could either raise your hand so Claire can call on you, or shout it out if you want to do that. What are some things that you took on that picnic with you?
All right, Teresa, if you want to go first, and then Catherine.
Hi. Several picnics, and we would take different types of cheeses, some crackers, maybe some crusty bread, and lots of fruit.
Nice, good. That sounds good to me.
Yep. Catherine, you can go ahead.
Potato salad.
There you go. And then Anne and Riley.
We took fruit sandwiches. Was it carrots?
Carrot salad. I think.
Carrot salad and water.
Good, yeah.
There you go.
So if we look at the screen, now note that Mrs. Beaton has made up her number 1 and number 2 menu. These are meant for 20-some people. The amount is in the sort of, Mrs. Beaton is an English cook, so everything is put into dollar amounts in terms of pounds. But you can see her menu there. Number 1, that would be something more for a family outing. And this is still, remember, we're in an upper class family, so this is a family outing. Number 2, you start off with lobster. So you have guests coming out to meet you at this picnic that you really want to impress with the lobster here. So we don't really
That's the
see.
picnic I would have gone.
Yeah. So we don't really see too much carryover with what we do today. We see a little bit. It mentions a few loaves of bread. It mentions biscuits. It mentions strawberries and such. And apples with the other one. Bananas. Wow, that was really something from back then. And pears. So there's a little bit of cheeses and stuff in there. So we still see similarities, but there's a lot of differences as well. And we're going to learn about kind of the menu was the easy part. We're going to learn about the work that went into putting together the picnic itself. Right after Dagmar gets started with the potato croquettes.
The hands just work the best. So I've put 2 blended eggs into potatoes that have been riced or just mashed. Don't use a mixer. That pulls out way too much gluten and makes them taste, it gives them more of a pasty feeling. So anyway, these have just been mashed. That is it. We are going to, Kyle, can you put breadcrumbs into a bowl? Well, it doesn't add it, it just goes in a bowl. So really what we do is we just take potatoes, another 2 eggs, when you scramble the eggs to coat something, you have to make sure that you vigorously mix them, because you've got to break down the 2 different eggs and make it a uniform mix, rather than the stringy. So in this case, I'm just going to hand shape these into what would have been croquet shapes. You're going to put them in the egg. Then you're going to toss them in the crumbs. A little messy, but now one of the things that Kyle will talk about down the line is that a lot of times picnics back in the day, things were cooked right then and there on fires. So this is something that would represent that.
Yeah, quick question. Catherine asks, what's a good size for those, I think?
It's a half a cup, basically. And I would say I'm probably doing more of a third.
Oh, and Anne, we have a question, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay, no problem.
I was trying to figure out the size.
Oh, yeah.
You'll see when I added the potatoes to the oil, I made sure that my hand was very close to the oil. This is a great opportunity for you to get a really bad burn from hot grease. And it's always a good idea if you can get in the habit that the first edge of what it is that you're putting into the hot grease is towards you, and then you let it go away from you. Okay, so these will just be cooking for a little bit while Kyle.
Okay, so we're going to go back to our history lesson as soon as Miss Claire brings up our next slide. And remember, we talked about the menu. That's a huge menu that we're talking about. It says for about 20 people. So if imagine cooking for 20 people, we got to think about the work that's going to go in to not just the cooking, but also making this picnic happen. Okay, so next slide, please. So for those of you who had taken a picnic, I know I'm picking on you a lot here, but what were some things, how did you pack your picnic? You just put in a tote bag? Did you put in a basket?
Catherine, you can go ahead if you would like to.
A cooler.
A cooler. All right, that's a good option.
Yep. Jill says just one little lunchbox.
Okay, that's good. So these are good answers because we're going to compare them to the hefty ways that they pack all their food. So what you're seeing on the screen here, this is from the Buckeye Cookery book that we mentioned at the beginning. So this is where our Minnehaha cake, which we're going to learn about a little bit later, came from. It says, it kind of smacks you in the face with this first sentence here, right? It says, first be up at 5 o'clock in the morning in order to have the chicken, the biscuits, etc., freshly baked. Provide 2 baskets, and these weren't small baskets. These were very large baskets. Well, yeah, exactly like this one, perfect timing.
And
So
this probably would be a small one.
Yeah, this is probably
actually
the medium to small
Yeah.
right here. So this is, so you're getting your baskets ready. Provide 2 baskets. One is going to be for your provisions, and the other is going to be for your dishes and utensils, which should include the following. All right, so you might have to get your reading glasses on for this next slide. I don't like to do a lot of text on slides, but I thought this was a good illustration. Okay, so it continues on. Your tablecloth and oilcloth, you're going to be putting under it napkins, towels, plates, cups, forks, a few knives, and tablespoons, teaspoons, sauce dishes, tin cups for tumblers, a tin bucket for water, in which you're going to place a bottle of cream, lemons, oranges, or other fruit which may be carried. This is a bucket with extra close cover, partly filled with made chocolate. Now that's going to be basically a very thick chocolate, almost like liquid chocolate, almost like chocolate syrup that's going to be used to making hot chocolate, which may be readily reheated. So we're reheating it when we get there by setting it in an old tin pail or pan in which the water is kept boiling. A frying pan, a coffee pot with the amount of prepared coffee needed tied in a coarse white flannel bag, so all that's wrapped in the bag. Your teapot is going to be taken, and you're going to have tea in a neat paper package. You're going to also be taking 10 boxes of salt, pepper, and sugar, a 10 box of butter. If you're carrying butter, and if you do carry butter, make sure you place it next to the block of ice, which should be well wrapped with a blanket and put in a shady corner of the picnic wagon. So all this is going in your wagon, remember. For extra occasions, add a freezer filled with frozen cream with ice well packed around it and heavily wrapped in carpeting. Now, that freezer filled with frozen cream and ice, what do you think that's going to be used for? It's going to be used for ice cream. So they've already made preparations for ice cream if you're taking that with you. Okay, our next slide. All right, now this is telling you how to pack. So to pack those baskets, you first put in the plates, cups, and sauce dishes. Then carefully with the towels, you put them in carefully with towels and napkins, and you're going to have extra paper if you need. Then you're going to add the rest of all those items, fitting them in tightly and covering all with the tablecloth and over it the oilcloth. An oilcloth is basically like the ring or your water repellent cloth. You're going to tie the coffee in the teapots that are well wrapped, and you're going to tie them with the frying pan, to the handles of that provisions basket. And you're going to apply it to the basket you're putting all of your stuff in. Your provisions basket, which is your food basket, it says simply to pack it as full as the law allows. And that was the words that they used. So
Yeah.
very interesting. Hopefully you can compare those to the picnics you go on. 2 baskets, a block of ice wrapped in a blanket, and your picnic wagon, of course. Don't forget to bring that. So we're going to go back to Dagmar with the potato croquettes, which are looking really good.
The potato croquettes are done, so you want them to be nicely browned. As long as your oil is hot enough, when you initially put the croquettes in, they're not going to be greasy. You can look at the surface of these. They're nice and dry. That is your key, is having your oil at the proper temperature. So these are our croquettes. And on to our cake. I'll take it.
Okay.
So the cake is very interesting. Not the easiest cake in the world to have mastered, I must say. The frosting, we're going to have to nuke. They would not have made the frosting ahead of time. And so, they would have made it and immediately put it upon the cake. And because I wanted to be able to show parts of this, the cake itself was very easy to put together. You're going to put together your butter and your sugars, you cream those, then you add your flour, you add, to your butter and sugar, you do alternating dry ingredients and your milk, dry ingredients, milk. You get all of that set, and then you take the egg whites, whip the egg whites, and gently fold those into the batter. And the way that you do that so that you still have air is you don't want to, stir vigorously. You want to take and do a folding movement with your spoon. It's also okay to leave a little teeny bit of the egg white, little particles of it here and there. Better to do that than to mix it so thoroughly that you lose the airiness. I will tell you, it is extremely light and crumbly. So that makes it a little difficult to deal with, especially getting out of the pan. It said simply to grease and flour the pan, which is what I did. I would use parchment. It was very difficult to get out of the pan. So the filling for this is quite stiff still. The filling is frosting and almonds and raisins. So to spread this, it's cut in half. So again, the fingers work the best. We're just going to put a nice thin layer. And it called for pitted raisins, because back in the day, there would have been raisins that they would have had the seeds from the grapes in them. That would have made it quite nutty. All right, so that's our one layer. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to take and put our middle layer. I did not have 3 of the same size pan. I had 2. So my middle one is a little narrower, which is going to be fine. It's all going to taste good.
And while she's doing that, I'll just go over the little mini haha cake trivia for you. So the earliest recipe comes from the Buckeye Centennial Cookery Book, which we kind of went through with our picnic, with how to pack your picnic. It was by Estelle Woods Wilcox in 1876. And Estelle, she was born a Buckeye, but she moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, following her marriage, where she built a national cookbook empire. So this is kind of like the Ree Drummond of her age in a way. And mini haha cake, it was seemingly syndicated within every cookbook that she did. And she did her cookbooks regionally. So there'd be a Southern cookbook, a Southeast cookbook. So all these cookbooks were kind of being done based on the regions of the U.S., and she was trying to get people to buy them. And mini haha cake became one of the few universal cake recipes that's been put in each of those. So one theory is that this cake was named for the fictional character Minnehaha, the bride in Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's The Song of Hiawatha. Perhaps named for the description of the wedding feast, which noted yellow cakes of Mondament, as this cake's layers, as you can see, are yellow as well. But it's just a theory. I have to say it's not quite been proven out per se.
And we have a question. Is the icing more malleable like fondant?
Much softer than a fondant. It's really interesting because if you go slowly over the top, it gets quite a glisten to it. But it's quite soft. It is granular. It's I did use a cooking thermometer, which is definitely suggested to get it to the right hardball stage. It came together pretty well. You add butter at the end, and I think that in my case the butter may have broken slightly, but the recipe that we gave you said to coat the sides and the top as well. You will not have enough frosting. And Kyle will tell you about the original one.
Yeah, the original one. Just
yes,
sorry.
Question?
Yeah, just a quick question from Anne and Riley. If you guys want to unmute yourself.
How long do you bake the cake?
30 minutes. Yep, so it's a pretty quick bake, 350 degrees. Let me show you this up close. So this is for the texture of the frosting. You can see that it's quite, it's not like a fondant at all. And it kind of, with the heat of your hand, it spreads. So on a good hot summer day, this will probably melt and dribble down the sides.
All right. So we're going to go back and finish up our history lesson of the picnic. So Ms. Claire brings our slides back up for us. Thank you. Go ahead and go to the next one. And I just wanted to show an example. This is from the original cookbook. This is from that original Buckeye Centennial Cookery Book, 1877, mini haha cake. And as you can see in there that they're just doing the layers and over the top. So as opposed to the little bit more modernized recipe that we provided, it does not actually, the original did not have frosting over the sides. So the one that we ended up with is actually the one that's a little bit closer to the original recipe overall. All right, so we'll go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So we've gotten the picnic packed, it's in the wagon, the block of ice is hopefully not melting everywhere. So that's half the work. And the picnic goers' work, or more likely the work of their servants, didn't end with laying out the blanket. You still had to cook or warm several items you brought with you. This usually required something a little more sophisticated than just an open fire. Remember, these are for social elites, so you're not just going to have a wood fire burning. So if we look at this image, if you look on the right-hand side, and go to the next slide, we've zoomed into that. So what we see is actually a small stove that they would have brought with them. It didn't mention that to pack, but if we look at these images, it was popular to have those small stoves packed. And we're going to take a look at another image, kind of show these a little bit better. So the heat source, it can be a little more clearly seen in this trade card. And by looking at the left-hand side of the image, and if we go to the next slide, there you go, a really close-up view of, it's a brand of stove that's meant to be employed on these occasions of going outside. The illustration is an advertisement from the Florence oil stoves, and these have been basically camp stoves, and they were burned off kerosene, sort of like a large oil lamp that you can think of. It's burning, it has a burner on the top, and this interesting model here, to get into the weeds a little bit, you can see she has pots on the right and left-hand side of that stove. They're not levitating from magic. They actually would have had kind of perches that they sat on, and those would have been swung over the top as they needed heated. And so you have different burners that are basically off because they're not directly over that stove. But interesting, you can see this one's on a trunk, whereas in our other image, they were just leaning on the ground. The poor servants had to work over the ground on their hands and knees to heat up their elements.
Well, and going back to that stove with those little shelves that come out, those would have been, if you look at the picture, those would have been at least a ½ inch to maybe an inch thick of cast iron. So those would have retained a lot of heat so that things would have continued to cook, much like our heat diffusers that we use on stovetops to this day. You have a pan that's thin and things catch on it, you can put a piece of cast iron down, and that becomes a diffuser and helps to slow down the cooking.
So, all right, we'll go to our next slide. All right, so picnics slowly devolved from their perch at the height of society to something that was a little bit less, for the less entitled. They could enjoy as a result of modernization. Picnics grew further in popularity, reaching their height following the Second World War, as modes of transportation became more affordable. Workers received paid vacation time, and communities heightened their focus on providing green spaces, even including picnic tables into those designs. Around the same time, supermarkets, they started selling items to make your picnic easier. They started selling, they're stocking their shelves with prepared foods, disposable plates, cups, napkins, utensils, coolers, as we heard mentioned earlier. Thermoses also became available, so you're not having to pack that block of ice or bring your stove with you anymore. All right, so that last slide. So we're at the point now where instead of getting up at 5 a.m. to prepare your decadent menu and packing a heavy basket with china and cookware and blocks of ice all the way across country, picnics can now be as free as you would like them, be as carefree as you would like them. You can toss some snacks in the tote bag, you can jump in your car and sit under a tree with friends. That's all it took. You don't have to be refined and have your servants with you or anything like that. So we wanted to put up this last image here just to show the real difference between what picnics, but they weren't called picnics yet, the outdoor feasts for these elite French hunters. And on the right hand side, this is still a very kind of, probably a still ritzy picnic that this couple is having. That's from the Picnic Society that Chris Stone did, that $120 picnic basket. So it's still decadent, but you can see it's a lot more relaxed. And so that's kind of where we're at today. It's interesting to see what a few centuries do to our eating
Well, and everybody who goes on a picnic now gets to enjoy the picnic. So as opposed to the past, when, obviously half of the people that were there were working very hard for their people to have a wonderful day. So, and it's also nice that it's a good opportunity for people to share different ethnicities and dishes and with potlucks and bringing things, and picnicking is here to stay.
All right, we can stop the share, and we're gonna show the finished product of all the work that Dagmar has been doing. Feel bad for her to contribute this time.
Oh, you always contribute. You kept the talking going.
Do we want to start at the other end?
So we'll go backwards,
Okay.
just because it's easier for our camera crew. But here we have our cake, which you can see sliced quite nicely. Then we come down we have our potato cakes, which smell delicious. Even in this short period of time, you can see that the coleslaw has started to break down a little bit. It smells wonderful. And here is our chicken salad. So it's a good start to a great picnic. Some fruit would be nice to add to this. I think, the addition of 4 to 6 bottles of wine with this would really make it spectacular. I'm ready to go back in time.
We have some wonderful comments. Jill, that cake. Teresa, the cake looks so good. And then Ann and Riley, my dinner.
Well, here, we'll let Gaia be the guinea pig.
Okay.
Here, well,
So as I guinea pig the cake, I'm happy to take any questions. Both Dagmar and I are here to answer your questions, either from the cooking process or the history, or if you have something to share, that'd be great too.
yeah. Go ahead, Catherine.
I watch this because I work in a cemetery, so my interest is the picnics. Do you know a little bit about that, or would you like me to share, or can you comment?
Perfect timing.
Sorry, you're eating.
The cake's really good, by the way. No, it's great. Good job. Yeah. So picnicking in cemeteries.
Mhm.
So as I think it was around the turn of the century,
1870s.
early 1900s, cemeteries as well as parks start seeing a design change from where they're being strictly cemeteries to being open spaces for people to enjoy. And so with all of that, the late Victorian era, they start to create these spaces that, you're not just burying your dead in, but there's green spaces that can also be enjoyed, and of course moderately and modestly, but creating those spaces for either reflection or just nature as well are things that kind of started to be thought about, and it has impacted cemetery design all the way up to today. But if you look at the cemeteries that were being kind of created at the turn of the century and early 1900s, they all has this element of it's not just for its final purpose. It is all encompassing of different things. And so it does have both cemetery and kind of a park-like atmosphere, kind of combined in one. They're still making parks, and if you look at with our local history, the evolution of Muskingum Park, when you look at some images that have that involved, you can see fence rails are put up around, you have walking trails, you can see people out and about, and so it's a very active park. I mean, it is today, but back then, outdoors and going outdoors was something that was very much highly promoted, and it sees that it's both coupled, as I've been saying, with both the park systems that are being created and cemeteries, oddly enough, but interestingly enough as well. So hopefully that's answered some of your questions. If you have any insight on that, I'd love to hear it. That's something that we kind of briefly covered in grad school. I had to reach far back to cover that. So.
Well,
No,
I do think, sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
think there are several religions that are visitors to their deceased. It becomes a very, families would go. I grew up in New England, and we would go. I can't remember really having a picnic there, but it wouldn't have been odd. It wouldn't have been unusual.
It actually started about the 1870s, and it was a Victorian thing. And you spent Sundays. You would pack a picnic and you took the family and you spent with the living and the dead. And it was very much the park-like settings, unlike today. And it actually was much more affluent in the UK than it is here. Unfortunately, it became more of a young person's thing. So unfortunately, people started trashing the cemeteries.
Yeah.
So it didn't last very long here in the US, whereas in England, it was much more of a thing. But thank you.
Yes,
And
the
food looked great. So thank you. I was very interested in the recipes.
Great. Hope you try them at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just go slight on that turkey.
Yeah, we have a couple questions too. Well, first a comment from Ann and Riley. 6 bottles of wine, my heaven. Right? Teresa asks, have you tasted the recipes yet? Which one's your favorite?
I haven't tasted them yet. The only thing that we tasted was the turkeys before the class, and it was like, oh heavens, I don't think I'll use 1 to 2 cups of that. So
you should try it.
If you want to kind of find a historically close kind of sauce, we can also do Marzetti dressing, which at least some of our chicken salad recipes, kind of mayonnaise heavy recipes, can use Marzetti dressing, which Marzetti goes back to, I believe, the 1920s. And it was actually here in Ohio, in Cleveland area, Marzetti dressing started out from.
Another question also about the chicken salad, so perfect timing to bring that out. But Jill asks, does the chicken salad taste creamier or richer? I'm used to a fresh, cool kind of chicken salad, so butter felt like a big change. So,
surprisingly, it tastes really good. I wasn't expecting it to taste as good. The vinegar is not, again, I only put in about, 1/4 to 1/3 the amount that it calls for. But it's how can I liken it to? It's very good. It's very crisp. It's light. It's good.
And Ann and Riley, you have a question?
What did they serve the wine in?
What did they serve the wine in?
Oh, so this was 1801. So 1801, they would have had different, stemmed wine glasses, and because it was indoors, they could kind of get away with using glasswares and stuff. Remember what that one slide we saw? It suggested using tin cups as quote tumblers. So that's because they're outdoors, and if they knock over their crystal glasses, it's going to be a bad day for the servants. Have to clean all that up. So indoors, they're able to show off their fanciness, and if they're bringing 6 bottles of wine, you know that they are there because they've got some money and they want to show off to their friends, sort of thing. So the glass bottles, they would pour it into a glass or a crystal, different size. Somewhere like that.
The coleslaw is also, it's very good. It's not very in your face horseradish, which is what you smell when you're putting it together. I would definitely make it the day before. I think that it needs that marinating.
Do you have any other questions?
Try the potatoes.
Yeah.
Potatoes are my favorite.
There's a local history comment from Jerry. I remember when I was a child that there was a pond with fish in Oak Grove Cemetery. My grandmother, who lived nearby, would take us on walks to see the pond and the fish.
Yeah.
The croquettes are very good. They need salt. They need seasoning. There was very little seasoning in this recipe, but I would definitely, at the time that you finish and the fat is still hot, I would add salt and pepper. That will start to render down into them. That would make them taste better. But they're good.
And the recipes that we provide to you, I mean, they're from 1880s, 1870s cookbooks, where if you haven't joined us before for food history, you've heard us saying this. If you haven't, these are not your modern cookbooks where you open them up and you have every single step delineated for you. You have every measurement. We know how hot the oven is. So those are our modern recipes. These recipes, you were expected to know how to cook if you're buying a cookbook. You weren't learning how to cook.
Right.
So the fact that it might not say season in it to add salt and pepper, that's because they already knew how to do that. And if you didn't know how to do that, you probably shouldn't be reading this cookbook anymore.
Yeah, if you look at like the recipes that are printed out that you've got, you have the snippet of the original one at the top, and then you have how I changed it to be what it needed to be for us to make it. It is interesting because little girls grew up in the kitchen and little boys, until they were old enough to go outside and help dad and everything, the farmers. But it was second nature to them to cook. So they knew what a fast oven was, what a slow oven was. Nobody had measuring cups. Often the measurements were referred to as an egg size of something, or a walnut size of something, or a teacup. A teacup has always been 8 ounces. I don't know why, but that is what a cup is. Wine goblets. It will ask for sometimes a wine glass as a measurement. Well, you have to remember back in the early to late 1800s, those wine glasses were much smaller than what they are today. Our wine glasses are, the doctor lets you have 1 glass of wine, so we go for this size. But back in the day, they were very small. They were very small because they were fragile, and it was easier for them to transport if they were small. And they were very coveted.
Jill says, thank you for modernizing the recipe so we don't all have to Google moderate ovens. And Catherine says, thank you so much for the history and recipes. Everything was so great. Teresa, thank you so much for the interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Any last questions before we go? Do you see how the hand raised?
Oh, yeah. Ann and Riley, did you have a question still?
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you enjoyed. We hope you try the recipes, and feel free to send Dagmar or myself an email. You should have that email that has all the recipes and stuff and on there, as well as the recipes included.
They're all good.
Yeah. Hopefully you try it. You can impress your friends. I know picnics aren't about impressing people anymore. They shouldn't be, but now you can have these historical.
Oh no, you always want to impress.
Well, now you have historical menu items you can use to impress people with, right? You can say, we learned this from the castle and the cook shop.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to see everyone's faces, and we hope you have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.